On this episode of Turning Point Tactics, I'm going to give you 7 of my top tips for competitive play to help elevate your game and make you better at the game of Kill Team. These aren't faction specific, these are general points that hopefully everyone can take away and apply, and they should be usable hopefully by players, top players, as well as your more casual players as well. So with that said, let's get straight into it. Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k YouTube channel focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm here to help give you the tips and tricks that elevate every part of your Kill Team experience. So no matter if you're a casual or a competitive player, there should be something here for you. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there's a few ways you can go about doing so. You can join the Patreon, where you get access to members only Discord, Patreon priority questions, early access to content, exclusive content, and tournament awards. Or if you find yourself buying Kill Team goodies or hobby supplies, you can use one of our affiliate links in the description below, or discount codes with Crossfire Games and GG Prints. We're always keen to hear your thoughts and feedback, so don't leave that comment box empty. Let us know what you think. Once again, thanks for your support, and with all that said, let's get into it. Alrighty, so we're straight into tip 1, which is understand scoring. So this is a tip that most people said many times, but I want to elaborate on it, right? So everyone in the last edition would talk about it's points team, not kill team, right? Because the whole idea was you need to be able to score points, and the points what actually makes you win. And that is still the same thing to today, right? Like it's a game that has 21 victory points, and essentially getting more points than your opponent is how you win the game. So you can table your opponent, but if you don't score any crit op or any tac op points and they max those areas out, they're going to beat you, right? So the key bit that I want to just deep dive into this is that understanding of how you can score points and when you're going to score points, because that's probably the next bit that's going to come onto this. So firstly, one of the things I'd say is you have 3 opportunities to score in Kill Team, right? And everyone's thinking, oh yeah, I've got the crit up, I've got the kill up, I've got the tac up. Well, yes, but you also only have 3 turning points to score them, right? So you have turning point 2, turning point 3, and turning point 4, right? There is no scoring that you can achieve in turning point 1 outside of the kill up. But actually, realistically, in high level play, you're not going to be scoring that much in turning point 1 for kill up anyway, right? Unless your opponent plays some significant misplays or something like that. So one of the key mistakes I see people do is they almost go too aggressive turning point 1 at the sort of more casual level, and they throw away models, right, which is potentially getting your opponent score points, but also denying yourself points. If you don't have any models left on the board in turning point 4, so you're tabled in turning point 3, you essentially have denied yourself 33% of the available VP. Right now, there's a potential that you might still score 1 or 2 points here and there, but generically, like if you've been tabled by turning point 3, you're going to score nothing in turning point 4, and that is a huge reduction in points. And when I say this edition, there's 21 points for you to score, you're winning or losing by like 1 or 2 points here or there. So really understanding that is key in my opinion. So the 2 bits that I want to push on this is firstly, like this understanding when you can score, and I'm going to build it into another tip later on, but just understanding that you have 3 turning points and 3 different methods during each of those turning points to score points is really critical, right? So you have to have that in the back of your mind. The next is going to be the weighting that you apply to the primary op. So the way that Kill Team works now is deliberately designed to have an asymmetric win path as part of it, right? So the idea being that we can be playing the same game, the same crit op, the same kill op essentially, but what's going to happen is the difference is going to be what tac ops we've chosen and then what primary op we've associated with those. So when it comes to selecting a primary op, because I was going to do a video about this in general, but it's kind of like I guess a quick point, and one that I'll try and make as concisely as possible. So for the primary op, you have to really consider like what you have the most control over and what is most likely to get you a return. So the way the primary op is broken down is also broken down into 3, right? So if you score 1 or 2 points, you're going to get a VP. If you score 3 or 4 points, you're going to get a second VP. And if you score 5 or 6 points, you're going to get that third VP. So really what you're looking for is like 5 or 6, right? Ideally, that'd be like always 6, why wouldn't you? But you can settle for 5 because that gives you a good reduction. But if you go to 4, although you've lost 1 point in that area that you're trying to get, you've actually lost 2 VP because you lost maxing the opportunity on the primary up as well. And same again, if you only get 1 or 2, then you're losing that opportunity again. So it comes like a double whammy on points for you by doing this. So understanding this scoring is really important. The thing that you usually have the most control over is going to be the tac op. So people always sort of like, I think, quickly rush to choose their primary op. And 99% of the time, I think the answer is going to be tac op, and that's what you should be choosing. If you're choosing the kill op, there's a lot of variance that's included within that. Like, you need to potentially win initiative, you need to have good dice rolls to kill people, your defense rolls need to go the way you want to go. You know, you want your opponent not to roll hot on their dice to be able to kill your models, etc., right? Whereas for the tac op, it's usually more in your control. And also, the VP points pool that is in a tac op isn't being competed over. So in a lot of the critical ops, and a lot of them, not all of them, you both can't like max, you both can't score, and therefore you're directly competing with your opponent on that really obvious crit op, or I guess kill op in a way, to get those VP, right? So if you're doing loot, each turn is only 3 VP available. If your opponent is taking 2 VP, then you're immediately down, right? And so you need to then try and bring it back. But you're now competing over this resource, and if they're better or faster than you, or they have the tools to be able to take that from you, then you're potentially in a bad spot. Now, there are certain crit ops, such as like coordinates, where you can very easily guarantee those points, right? So that's something to consider, is like reading the crit op, and I've done a crit op guide, so go check it out where I talk about this. And you can go, yeah, you know what, like actually that's probably a good one for me to select as the primary op, because I can probably reliably get, say, 4 points or 5 points, and I'm only making a small push to try and get it over the line. Or you know that you have a particular asymmetric advantage in that particular mission against that particular opponent. Now, one of the other things that I'd say is like, knowing all the ways people can score means all the ways that you can score and all the ways that your opponent can score, right? So understanding scoring includes that opponent's knowledge. That's the sort of second point I want to try and make. So if you understand your opponent's tac ops, you can start considering how you're going to deny them, right? So let's say the obvious one is like security, right? You're playing against an opponent that has security tac op. Well, in turning point 2, you want to have a model that can end up wholly within their territory. Denying it by 1 is a good start, right? Because it gives you an opportunity to see what's happening, or finish on the center line, or finish in the center objective, or push their strongholds wherever it needs to be, right? So you want to start thinking about like, okay, how could they score this? What do they want to achieve, and how's it going to work? And as I go through these other tips, I always think about that as you go through, like how well do you know the tac ops outside the ones that you're regularly picking, right? And then how can you potentially influence them and deny them? One of the main reasons, like a lot of competitive players really like the recon archetype, or particularly plant beacons, is specifically because it cannot be denied by your opponent, and it is scored in turning point, right? So a lot of the other tac ops are scored at the end of the turning point, or part of it scored into the turning point, and therefore like it gives your opponent the opportunity to potentially deny it, right? And turning point 2 is a great example, because for a lot of security tac ops, most people will max on turning point 2, because unless you're playing it like planning ahead, or you think you know what they've taken, you might deny them for 1 but unlikely to deny them for 2, or you just get it wrong and you guess that they've gone for one thing but it's actually the other, or whatever it's going to be, right? So they can potentially like outwit you. But turning point 3 and 4, you now know exactly what they've got, right? So like, there is no reason why you shouldn't be having the denial of their VP as part of your key sort of game plan in turning points 3 and 4. And this brings you back to the earlier point, right? You have 3 opportunities to score: turning point 2, turning point 3, and turning point 4. And if you don't think about that and that longevity of the game, if you get table in turning point 3, then your opponent's guaranteed to max their contain, right? So by playing potentially a slightly slower gameplay, you can maybe deny more VP. But it applies to all of the tac ops, right? Like, thinking about where you position your models, does that help potentially for them to take seek and destroy, storm hostile objectives? Does it take help for them to score overrun, that sort of thing? Like, what is it that you're doing? Like, are you against a melee team, right? So if you're against a melee team, by being in their half, like, it's going to reduce the ability for them to be able to potentially score overrun, and therefore maybe what you do is you try and push up the board further, and you use that movement to deny them the ability to score that. So really understanding scoring both ways is one of the key tips I think people should do. So I've done a tac op guide, I've done a crit op guide where you can look at those, and then you can obviously just like use those other tips to hopefully figure out how you're going to do better on the kill op. But generically, I think if you understand those things and you choose your primary op correctly, you're going to help elevate your scores. And by doing so, you'll reduce the sort of the delta between scores and increase your likelihood to be able to win. Because I think, as I said, most games come down to a few VP here and there. And if you can make that one VP here and there, then suddenly you've got the opportunity to swing it and potentially score a win. So first one, understand scoring, is my first tip. Okay, tip 2, I'll talk about tempo. Now, tempo in this edition is really, really different to last edition, right? So last edition, all 4 turning points we were scoring, all 4 turning points people were competing. You would probably have, again, like a somewhat quiet turning point 1, but there was still people moving on to objectives to score points, right? Because they had to. And you have this sort of like alpha strike sort of ability. Well, that can still be true on some of the missions, like loot still plays slightly differently to other ones. But I think each crit op has their own tempo, and you have to kind of understand like how that tempo is playing, and you can also make that work as part of your attack ops, right? So the attack ops have tempo to them as well. So by that, what I mean is this: when you read the crit op, is it scored during the turning point? And when you read your attack op, is it scored during the turning point? Or is it scored at the end of the turning point, i.e. do you have to get to the end? Or is it scored at the end of the game? Now, the sort of the caveat on the end of the game is there like a rider, which is like your actions throughout the game add you points, or is it just like a set, yes, this is how much you get? And because of that, like it can completely change your game plan, right? So really good example, 2 crit ops that are scored at the end of the game, right? One is coordinates and one is intel, right? So coordinates is the one where you go and tap the objectives. If you tap each objective, you get a VP for the one in the center line and your home, and you get 2 VP if you tap your opponents, right? So you can potentially do 3 APL worth of actions throughout the game and get guaranteed 4 VP at the end of the game, right? And then if you have more taps on objective than your opponent, then it goes up, right? So coordinates is a really good one because quite regularly you can be getting 5 VP because your home objective, let's say, has 2 or 3 taps on it, and then you tap all the other objectives once. Your opponent does the same thing. You're both fighting over a somewhat shared resource, but actually not too much. And as a result, you can both quite easily score 5, potentially 6 points. Not both 6 points, but you potentially score 5 points each, or one of you scores 6 points. And you're like, well, actually that works kind of well, right? But that's an end of game scoring mechanic, but it's entirely reliant on what your actions scored during the turning point. So although it's scored at the end, it's actually realistically scored in turning point, because as soon as you've done that action, no one can deny you that VP, right? So if you tap all 4, you're guaranteed, all 3 objectives, you're guaranteed 4 VP. Let's look at intel though, complete opposite side of it, right? On intel, each time you tap that objective, it gains a VP's worth, essentially, but only the person who controls that objective at the end gets the VP. So your opponent could just not tap any objectives all game, and you could be tapping the center objective and your home objective, and then they take them from you, and now suddenly your objectives are worth nothing, right? So if you don't have models available and surviving until turning point 4, you will score 0 on the crit op. So if you're against a particularly killy team, or you think that you're against an aggressive opponent, you know they're going to come at you, and you're worried about your durability and survivability, selecting that crit op as your primary op is a huge risk, right? Like, you know it's a bad risk, but also you then probably want to play around the fact that it's like, I might not actually even score this. So one of the things that people often do is just deny VP, right? So they go, okay, well, I know that I'm not going to be around till the end of the game, so I'm going to make sure that these things that are on the board are worth the least amount possible, so that I can potentially get my asymmetric win advantage, right? So by doing that, you might just tap it and pick it up straight away. And then same for the middle one, right? And so now suddenly it's like, well, okay, best I can get on the crit up is 3 VP, even if I table my opponent and stand all the objectives. So that's pretty difficult for your opponent to have to deal with, right? So it's a really good way of suppressing the score, and that's a good way of potentially, in my opinion, restricting how your opponent plays. The other thing to consider is how much VP can you score per turning point. So again, let's go back to these 2 examples. So for intel, you can potentially score 6 VP, as in you at the last turning point, you score 6 VP all within a turning point. Save coordinates, right? You can potentially tap all 3 objectives and you can score 4 VP by doing that. And potentially, if you tap them more than your opponent, that could be your 6 VP right there and then, and that's going to be scored in a single turning point. So you can sort of like bias your APL into a certain turning point to be able to get those scores. But let's say you're playing like loot, where you can only ever score maximum of 2 VP a turning point. So again, like understanding how and when you can score VP is essential to your understanding of how aggressive you need to play or how passive you should be playing, right? So that sort of like tempo, as I describe it, is really important to have in the back of your mind, right? So if it's like I need to be alive at the end of the game, when you come to that decision point, mid turning point, where you go, oh, you know, like there's a bit of a high risk opportunity here, and I could potentially kill this guy, but I also could potentially lose my guy, and I don't have enough people to keep me alive and keep me through that turning point. Well, that answers the question for you, right? Like the win condition for this game is getting to turning point 4. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's something to consider. Now, as I said, like every single one of these crit ops plays differently, and that's part of the skill of the player is understanding that tempo and understanding the caveats of when the tempo no longer applies, right? I can't teach you that because each one of those is so situational, but understand those situations and trying to apply that consideration to it. Like, do I think this is a slow tempo game or do I think this is a fast tempo game? And trying to play it like that is probably something to do, because amusingly with coordinates, you can actually play like a very fast tempo game. You could potentially be on your opponent's objectives, you know, turning point 2, and if you tap every objective once, well, you've got 4 VP straight away, right? So you could play a really high tempo game and you're already above the 50% mark before you've even done anything else. So something to consider is the tempo. Okay, top tip 3 that I've got. I realize I'm going to run out of fingers because I've got 7 of these tips, so it's not going to work out. Anyway, sequencing. So sequencing is really, really important, right? So the sort of the classic example is which model and when, right? And you can see how this sort of all sort of plays into the previous tips as well, right? So if you understand like how you can score and how your opponent scores, and you understand the tempo of the game that you're playing, you can then figure out what your sequencing needs to be. So there's a few things that you can consider, right, when it comes to what model needs to go next. One of them is like, and the easiest one, right, is let's say you've finished turning point 1, you're at the start of turning point 2, you win initiative, and you're like, cool, I get to choose who's going to go first. Now, you can look at the board state, and you can go, right, which of my models can realistically be killed, right? Because if the answer is there's only one of your models that your opponent can interact with, and they can only kill one model, well, you're in a good spot then just to go, okay, well, I'm going to do something with that guy because I'm going to use him before he goes. And that can quite often be the sort of the mentality is if you have APL that is available and can be used, like if you let him die before he does his thing, or they do their thing, sorry, then potentially you've just wasted that APL, that scoring potential, that damage potential, potential to reduce your opponent's scoring or whatever it's going to be, right? So whatever their ability is, like you've wasted it by them dying. So instead, you need to think, okay, well, if this is the only person that's in threat, I'm going to activate them. Potentially what happens is that you end up and you go, all right, well, I've got these 3 people that could be threatened, and I need to make a decision between these 3. And that's where I'd say, like, you need to go back to that primary op decision that you've made and try and figure out where you are in the game. And again, based on the tempo of the crit op and the match itself, like what makes the most sense. So if you think that you are in a scenario where you can potentially jump on your opponent's objective and deny them a lot of VP, or you can get a large VP swing, is what we call it, then you might want to do that, right? Like, let's say the example is it's intel, you have poach, your opponent's tapped their objective once, so it's worth 1 VP, and you know that the only opportunity that you're going to have to be able to get this guy is moving your creep dude on it and poaching that objective, picking it up, and then as a result, they now can't score it more than that on their crit op, right? Well, that could be like a really good move to do, and you just go, okay, well, I'm doing that straight away, because now, whatever my opponent does, I've just reduced their ability to score primary ops, potentially. But let's say that you're not in that sort of scenario. Let's say you're in one where actually the damage matters, right? So you're playing against elites, and there's, you know, an elite that's on low wounds remaining or something like that, and you have an opportunity to potentially finish them. And as I said, reduce their APL, reduce their scoring, and then potentially take them out. Because the other way to think about this is, and I talk about losing models, is you also lose the potential of what that model can do in future, right? So that turning point, by killing that elite, you deny them 3 APL, right? That's really useful because they're going to potentially lose a fight action, a shoot action, or 2 fights, 2 shoots, a mission action, whatever it is. They might miss out on their positioning and their ability to deny you contain, etc., etc. But also you denied them that for turning point 3 and turning point 4, right? So people often think about, I like stun grenades because it removes an APL from that model for this turning point, and therefore I want to take stun grenades with me. But the melter can do the same thing, right? It's like that it can remove 3 APL from that team, right here, right now, and it can do another 3 APL the turn after and 3 APL the turn after that if it goes well. So understanding that and understanding when these things happen is really important, because killing a model in turning point 2 is way, way more impactful than killing a model in turning point 4, right? Particularly if they've already activated. So if you're killing a guy who's already activated, immediately the value of the kill is reduced, and therefore you're probably better off killing them before they activate most of the time. And again, there's always something there's always some caveats to this and that sort of thing. If it potentially means that they get a counteract which has a model in a really important place and you don't want them to be able to do that, etc., potentially. But bear with me, genuinely that's how it works. So the general point I was trying to make there, sequencing is really important, and understanding when and where to go. So which model, i.e. who's in the best position to do the best sort of thing, you can do that via either looking at what you can deny your opponent, be it APL, be it VP, or what you can gain yourself, be that VP for the kill op or VP for tac ops, or whatever it's going to be. And then, are your models in danger? Are they not? If they're not in danger, you can probably chill out. You can do some of the more sort of passing moves, right? So you'll see a lot of top level players just do loads and loads of passing moves. If they're using a big activation team, they're going to do boring stuff where you don't get to interact with it at all. It's their backline, it's moving around, it's shifting APL, it's doing comms buffs, it's moving a medic into a certain place, it's putting a particular benefit on a model to be able to attack you in a certain way, right? It's building up for what they want it to be able to do, ready for the next turning point. And finally, what I say about sequencing is sequencing isn't just in turning point, but it's between turning points. So a really good example is I often see people try and do a turn 1 melt gun shot and get a kill. And as a result, they move their melt gun up, they shoot on turning point 1, they don't get the kill, and then they lose the initiative on turning point 2, and now suddenly the melt gun dies, first activation, right? Well, of all the turning points where you can score stuff, this comes back to the whole tempo and understanding scoring and that sort of thing. You can score in turning point 2, you can score in turning point 3, and you can score in turning point 4. Your melter gunner being alive in those turning points 3 and 4 is way more impactful than it is potentially being alive in turning point 1 and 2. Potentially, right? It's all situational. So it might be better for you to sequence your turn. So instead of going really, really aggressive turning point 1, you instead play a stalling game, and you let your opponent do all of their activations on turning point 1, do all of their activations on turning point 2, and then at the end of turning point 2, you do a melter gun strike, you do your damage, and then at the start of turning point 3, they're now having to use that EPL to focus on killing a melter gun guy, but they're doing it at a less opportune moment if you lose initiative, or if you win initiative, you're into winner and you can get another kill. So understanding that your sequencing is between turning points as well, having that last activation of a turning point and the first activation of another turning point is really, really important. So just a quick reminder of those sort of top 3 points. It's understand scoring, understand tempo, and sequencing, right? And hopefully that kind of makes sense, and how the sort of the thought process goes through. Okay, the next one is going to be probability. So I think a lot of people don't understand the probability of the certain actions they're taking, and they will often expect it to be way more in their favor, or they're taking higher risks than they think they are without realizing that they're doing it. Now that doesn't mean, by the way, that you won't get stung by this. Everyone gets stung by probability, right? Probability is not guaranteed. That's the whole point, right? So I can tell you what is likely to happen. I can tell you how likely it is to happen on a percentage basis. But what I can't do is guarantee you an outcome. I mean, there is some instances where you can guarantee an outcome, but particularly in rolling dice, it's usually not that case, right? So I think when people do their sort of prep for tournaments, you should probably have an understanding of the likelihood of or some of your events like from actually happening. So a really good example would be like a melter gunner for a guard team killing a marine, right? So like you go into it thinking to yourself, right, I've got this melter gun guy, and in turning point 1, my last activation is going to be this melter gun guy shooting this marine, and most people would expect that to result in a kill, right? Like they're going, in my mind, I'm going to get a kill, but you're hitting on 4s. Maybe you have balance, maybe you have ceaseless, or whatever. But realistically, like you might get like 2 hits. Or you might, if you're lucky, like get a crit and a hit, and you think to yourself, "That's really, really good." Like, I use a reroll, and now I've got a crit and 2 hits. That's actually on a 4-up team, like kind of unlikely to happen in the first. Like, it's about 50-50 that you get that result, and then what you're relying on for you to be able to get that kill is your opponent failing their save. And let's say it's a marine, well, they're saving on a 3-up. So if they make their save, then you're hitting a crit. So 6 damage for your normal hit, 7 damage for your crit, does 13 damage. Well, now, like, you've done 13 damage to a marine, and they have 14 wounds, right? So, like, he ain't dead. And if you actually look at the maths of it, it will tell you that it's about like a 40-odd% chance that you get the kill. And people, like, are surprised by this, right? They throw it out there and they go, this is guaranteed to happen. And it's like, no, it's really not. Like, you got to have relentless, or you got to have, turning off their rerolls, having loads of rerolls yourself, whatever it is going to be, right? So, but actually having like an understanding of the likelihood of the thing that you're doing is really, really important. Another good example is like the initiative roll itself, right? Like people think it's like 50-50. It's not. If you're winning on draws, it's 58% in your favor to 42%. That still doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win, right? And people would say this, like, you can go through many a game where you've never won initiative, right? Because although it's 42%, it's unlikely to work out in your favor. My point being is that for your team, you can figure out roughly what you think based on the generic probabilities are of like an opponent. So what's the likelihood of you killing the marine when you charge him with a power sword, for instance, as a corsair or something? How does that change if they have an extra wound, or if they can parry before you, whatever? And there's like a whole bunch of people out there that have made these kill team calculators that do all this maths for you, and they can tell you like what the result is. You can also use ChatGPT for some of these, by the way, as well. Like, you can just type it in and say, can you figure this out for me? And it will do a basic Python scripting, whatever it is, to figure it out, and it will tell you how to do it. But essentially what I'm saying is that having an understanding of how likely this is to work out for you is really important. You can get this through experience, so like you don't necessarily have to be good at maths. Like, I'm not good at maths, right? I just use the calculators, and I have a little bit of I have quite a lot now experience in playing Kill Team, where I've seen these dice roll a certain amount of time, and I get to a point where I go, I sort of know what to expect when it comes to these dice, and how likely it is to happen, and how not likely it is to happen. So I guess the point is this: it's like, let's say that you're taking a 40% chance to kill a marine. Well, 60% of the time, it's not going to kill him, right? So like, straight up, what is your like backup plan to that event, right? Like, and how many backup plans you have should be like absolutely related to how likely it is that your thing is going to work. Okay, so if you have something which you know is 100% guaranteed, like my model can move, dash, and plant a beacon, and that is 100% a guaranteed outcome for me, because that model is not within threat range of anyone. No one can reach them. There's no way that they can get there. It's 100% certainty. I don't need someone to back up that action, right? Like, that is guaranteed that I'm going to be able to do that thing, and it's going to stop my or it's going to score me a VP potentially, right? However, if I'm trying to kill this marine, and that's really, really important to me, and I'm basing it on the 40%, well, I probably need to think about having some other model, or maybe 2 other options to back up killing this guy, right? So it's like, okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is hit you with a melter gun, and if it goes really well, sweet, happy days, and move on my life, and I won that engagement. If it doesn't, well, I've actually got a guy over here who's got a crack grenade, and he's going to back it up, and he's going to follow him with another shot. Or I'm going to stack the probability in my favor. I'm going to add rerolls, I'm going to add purity seals, I'm going to do whatever I need to do, right, like, to make sure it's likely to happen. But my point being is like, what is your backup plan? Like, what is your insurance when it goes wrong, and how are you going to make that work? So for a lot of people, I think just having that rough understanding of like what damage you expect to do and what is the probability of it working out for you is really important. and then having a backup plan when it goes wrong. Okay, into tip 5, and this is where I think a lot of people, and this including myself, can always get better, right? So this is my tip for this. Tip 5 is positioning, and this is why it's directly related to probability, because there are some things that with positioning you can deny your opponent any chance of being able to do the thing that they want to do. So people get annoyed because their opponent rolled hot and they killed whatever it was. Their multi-gunner managed to get a shot and killed the guy because he rolled 4 6s. You weren't expecting it, and it was highly unlikely, but it happened, right? And you're like, well, this is bullshit. Well, yes, like that is unfortunate, and that is part of the game, right? However, if you were positioned in a certain way where your opponent couldn't reach that model, well, actually then it becomes irrelevant, like how good they roll, because you can potentially solve a lot of these issues with positioning. Now, not always, and particularly towards the later turning points, my point will be is that this kind of deteriorates because you can't stay out of everyone's threat range the entire game whilst also scoring points. Like that's not how the game is designed, and there's a reason why it's not designed that way. But positioning is really, really important, because if you can position in such a way where you can guarantee outcomes, so I can guarantee to be safe on turning point 1, well, that works well for me. Or I can guarantee to be able to make a threat where I need it to be, that's useful to me. So there's a few things that I think are really useful to measure to, and that's going to help you to direct where you need to position. So firstly, again, this comes down to sort of your win condition, right? So if your primary op, let's say we're doing plant beacons again, just for the sake of argument, because it's the easiest example. You're doing plant beacon, and that is your primary op, right? So the main thing that you're going to score on this game is going to be those beacons. Well, what's 100% critical to your success of doing that is being able to do that twice per turning point, each turning point. So by that I mean, do you have the movement potential on turning point 2 to move and plant, or move dash plant, whatever you need to be able to do to get a beacon in your opponent's territory, right? That's the first thing. Yes, no, whatever, cool. The answer should always be yes, right? So for some teams, it's really easy. You can move really, really fast. For other teams, if you're a slow team, you need to make sure that you are still being able to do that movement. The next thing you need to consider is how much spacing you need between beacons to be able to actually make that realistically achievable and be able to do it everywhere you need on the board, right? So my example would be you want to make sure that there is 6 inches between where you plan to put your beacon that's 4 inches away from your home and the one that's going to be in their territory. And that might mean that you need to be slightly further into their territory to be able to guarantee that 6-inch separation. And therefore, you need to plan ahead when you're doing your turn 1 move to go, okay, if I put a beacon that's exactly 4 inches out of my deployment, and I then put another beacon that's just over the halfway line, where does my model need to be to make that achievable? And is there somewhere I can do that where I'm going to be safe? I'm going to be in cover, or I'm going to be just in the open. For horde teams, you might just do it in the open because you don't care too much about your model, and they become expendable once they've achieved that VP condition. But for elite teams, you probably don't want to do that because they're not expendable. So where can you do it where it's safe? So measuring those tac ops is really important. I talked earlier about unturned scoring. It's not just about your tac ops, though, is it? It's about your opponent's tac ops. So understanding what they might try and do is, again, really important. Security is the best one to use as an example for this, because they're going to want to keep you either out of their half, off the center line, or out of their buildings, wherever it's going to be. Cool. All right, so do you have the movement potential and the positioning to achieve that? Can you, with your move, end your turn wholly within your opponent's territory? Is a question. Can you end your move on the center line, within 3 inches of the center, or wherever it's going to be, right? And you can do that in the turning point, or during turning point 1 to set you up for turning point 2, and then do exactly the same thing during turning point 2 for turning point 3, and turning point 3 for turning point 4, right? The difficulty is, and this is where it becomes, where you see the skill expression of players, is as you get further into the game, doing that becomes harder and harder, whilst competing against the other priorities you have of killing models, scoring different objectives with a reducing resource pool, and therefore this becomes harder to do. And this is why also high movement teams are generally better and are much easier to play with, because you can get to places that are further away, and it reduces that burden of you planning ahead potentially further on, right? So that's why they're stronger. So that's tac ops, right? So measure for your tac ops, can you do the thing that you need to do for your tac op, whatever it might be? Measure for your opponent's tac ops, can you deny them the way that you expect to deny them, etc., etc. And this, by the way, as well, just quickly on like killing people, like plant beacons, for example, if they only have one model that can reach over your halfway line, and that model is, and you're against a recon team, like killing that model should be a high priority for you, because then they now can't reach over to the halfway line to be able to score that point. You force them to go down a point on plant beacons, right? So just FYI, like you can see that what they're doing, and that can help inform your killing as well, as opposed to just your maneuvering. Next one's gonna be the crit op, right? So can you position in a way which is going to be able to like get you to where you need to be able to be for the crit op? So if you're a 6-inch move team, like, okay, where can I position that's 6 inches away from the center objective such that I can get a toe on that objective and be able to be on there? Or maybe you want to be able to kill someone that's on there, so how can I get my models in such a place that wherever they are on that objective, I can get within either 2 inches to shoot them or 1 inch to fight them in combat, whatever your particular play style is, right? If you're a shooter or melee team. And then work back from that, right? So where's the terrain bit that you need to be? So like if you end up on that objective, where do you need to go? Like where do you need to be able to achieve that movement? And if the answer is like when you look at the board that there is nowhere to go, and you're like, oh, like I can't get to that middle objective because the only places are in light terrain, I'm against pathfinders or something like that. Okay, well, this sounds like a perfect opportunity for you to invest in a heavy barricade and be like, okay, I don't have the terrain on the board to solve this problem. So therefore what I'm going to do is use an equipment option to solve it for me, right? So I'm going to go here and position in this place to be able to achieve this. Or maybe you use a smoke grenade to protect the light cover that you're going to use because the team doesn't have ignore obscurity. Or you're using the portable barricade because you think that the 2-up save is sufficient to be able to get you to that position. Whatever it is, right? Like I'm not going to get into what the solution is for your team, but the positioning is what's key, right? Like you can determine, can you reach that crit op? Can you reach that primary objective? And if so, where can you reach it from? And if the answer is you can't reach it from anywhere that's useful, then you need to make somewhere that's useful for you. All right. So that's like how you consider your positioning. Just to flip it 180 again, because we're going back to this understanding scoring, your opponent's trying to do exactly the same thing, right? Like they are trying to do this exact same sort of thought process, and therefore having a consideration when you're doing your positioning as to where might my opponent position to achieve the same thing is important. And is there a way that you can, through team selection, operative choices, equipment selection, positioning yourself or movement with yourself, deny them the same ability, right? Because that might be something that you can do. Okay, so that is tac ops and that is crit op, right? Those are the first two. There is a third way that which you can score in this game, which is kill op, right? And so there is a few ways in which you can 100% improve your gameplay via positioning, and that is threat measuring to your opponent's models and threat measuring cover lines. So by this, I mean, it's as simple as this. Like just agree with your opponent when their model is behind cover that they might have to do a 1 inch step out, right? And you go, cool. And then you move, say, 7 inches forwards because that's their charge range. So 1 for the side, 7 forwards, they have a 1 inch control range. You then figure out where that is. And so long as you're outside of that range, you can be outside of it by 0.01, or you can be out of it by, wherever it is, half an inch, doesn't really matter. You can go, whatever that model does, like you cannot charge me if it is where it is currently, right? And there is a thing here, which is the caveat of understand teams that can take out of action movements because they'll mess with this. But the point being is use that threat range. So agree with your opponent, like help each other out. That's what the game's all about, right? It's like, where is he right now? Where could he reach? I'm now going to sit outside of it. But then ask yourself like these questions that, as I said, based on the tempo of the game, based on the win condition that you're trying to do, is that like acceptable? Does that position let you reach the crit op that you need to score? You're playing a fast-paced tempo game. You might need to take risk on your operatives because otherwise you ain't going to score points and he's going to be useless potentially. Or you're playing a slow tempo game and you're against a team which you out-activate. Well, you know what? I'm going to sit outside your threat range. I'm going to let you move on to the objective because we're playing transmission. It's scored into the turning point. I'm going to come and kill you on that objective and I'm going to score the points anyway, right? It's like understanding those points is key to your positioning as well. The next bit is going to be cover lines and threat ranging those. All right, so a lot of people, like, I think for melee teams, it's like almost easier to figure out those things because it's like a really binary, this is where you can reach me, this is where you can't, sort of thing. But you can do exactly the same thing with cover lines, right? So if you take a laser line and you agree with your opponent where the cover line is for a certain model, then you can go, okay, like based on this angle or this particular line, can you reach it with these models? And you can go through and you can ask that they can do the measuring or whatever it's going to be, and maybe you tuck your guy more in to make the cover line different, or you put it further out to give yourself a bit more maneuver, because actually that they can't reach that cover line, right? So understanding those like drawing that line across the board and then measuring to that line with their key shooters will be really important. And I think as part of this, like, it is a cooperative game. You need your opponent to help you out with some of this. And if they do, it's going to help you speed up for both you and your opponent, and that's going to help everyone win, right? So you don't want to be slow about this, and just watching a person figure it out on their own isn't helpful. So just be clear with your intent, explain to them what you're trying to do, let them help measure it. And once you've both agreed, you can go, yep, we're agreed on this, we're agreed on the intent, then you can press with the game, right? And it will speed up the game for you. So that kind of covers off positioning. And talking about speeding up is where we're going to go into my sixth top tip, which is playing to time, right? So I appreciate that I'm 40 minutes into a video talking about how timing is important. The game itself takes longer now, right? So we used to play the game in about an hour and a half, and now it's taking probably 2 hours for most players. I think that's a pretty common trend, and that's not going to go away. Again, back to the scoring point right at the start of this episode, right? Like, you have to understand how you score, and for most of the games, the scoring is separated in turning point 2, 3, and 4. And therefore, if you don't get to turning point 4 or you don't get to turning point 3, you're either going to miss out on 33% or 66% of the available score, and that can really hamper you because, again, just think about how tiebreakers work in a lot of tournaments. If your tournament uses a VP-based tiebreaker and you don't get to turning point 4, like, it is not just like you that is losing, it is both of you, right? So like your opponent like will also lose VP, which means they're also less likely to place, and they're less likely to be able to score stuff going forwards. So the game is going to take longer, and you need to finish the game, and you need to try and get to those final turning points. And I see people way too often like wasting decision-making time on stuff that is largely irrelevant, and they don't need to necessarily need to do so. So I talked about it in a previous video a couple of videos ago, the various ways that you can speed up your gameplay, and I can probably remake that as a video, sort of top tips to do it. But you do need to do that, right? You need to have the sort of the mental shortcuts in your mind where you go, okay, this is turning point 1, I only care about positioning. This is turning point 2, I only really care about like dealing damage to my opponent and just focusing on denying them doing damage to me. This is turning point 3, like I really want to focus on a sort of blend of still denying my opponent some score, but actually it's now I want to score myself. And turning point 4, I'm just, all I care about is VP. I don't care about doing damage to my opponent at this point because it doesn't change the outcome, and I just want to make sure I get my tac op completed, my prime op completed, whatever it's going to be. All right, so I think that mental shortcut can help you make those decisions. As I said, if you work with your opponent during the positioning steps and you say, cool, like I'm in a position here to do this, do you agree? And they say yes, you can just press, right? And you can then quickly move on to the next stage of the game, their activation, whatever it needs to be. Understanding the probability of your outcomes like ahead of time will help speed up your decision making, right? So if you know it's a guaranteed thing, like I can move dash and boop your objective, and it scores me a VP, it denies you a VP, that's a 2 VP swing, and it's 100% guaranteed to happen. That sounds like a pretty good thing to do on turning point 4, right? Like, why would I not do that? If it's like I'm going to do something that's like a 20% chance of success, okay, maybe there's a better option there that you can use to increase your likelihood of succeeding elsewhere. All right, so playing to time is really important, right? That's my overall point. There's a whole bunch of ways you can speed up, but you need to sort of like take them all into account. So hopefully the earlier points will give you some ideas and tips on that. And I said, if not, go rewatch my sort of like how I lost tournament video. I talk about it in there. And if not, then I'll do another video about speeding up the gameplay. But I've done some previously, which hopefully are useful. Okay, we're into the final tip, which is tip 7, right? Which is asking questions, or like use the app, right? Like, I can't really describe when's best to do both, but I'll try and make it clear now. So one of the issues, again, this comes back into the time, right, is that I don't think we have time now to really explain team rules to your opponent. So you just need to ask quick questions as you go through. So, can you ignore obscurity? Yes, no, during deployment, cool. Do you have access to Seek or Seek Lite? Yes, no, cool. Do you have any APL modifiers that you can do right now? Do you have any out of sequence movement, right? So if you just learn to ask these questions as you're going through, it can speed things up, and it can mean you don't have to reference rules, and you can use your opponent's brain and all that sort of stuff, right? So a classic one for me when I'm doing positioning, this is why my mind, my opinion, like Felgor are one of the hardest teams to play against, is because of all these rules, and therefore it makes positioning really hard, which just draws out the game. But let me explain why, right? So I want to position my guys that he can reach the objective and be out of threat range of a certain Felgor model. And I have to ask, right, do you have any out of sequence moves? And they go, yes, I can actually dash 3 inches in the strategy phase of my leader. And it's like, okay, cool. So you could end up here potentially. So I need to be slightly further back, or I need to be a different place, or I need to have an equipment piece in the way to deny you. And then you go, okay, like, if I move here, is it safe? Well, actually, if I charge with this guy, I can then do a separate charge, right? So like asking those sorts of questions of, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can help inform you as where best to go. Now, there is going to be a time where you potentially don't want to ask those questions because it's going to be like giving away your game plan, right? So and like, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it, but like, let's say you want to know, like, do you have a way to make mission actions more expensive, for instance, like you're against Inquisition, and by telling them that, like, you're telling them that you want to go and do a mission action on their objective, and therefore they're clued into the fact that they have a ploy that they can use to stop it, or whatever it's going to be, right? Generically, like, most of the time, I'm personally a fan of just open, honest gaming, right? Like, I very rarely like to withhold information from my opponent. I'll explain a specific case example where I do, because what I want to do is I want my opponent to be able to understand, like, it's a decision-based win condition for me. I want my opponent to have made decisions and be informed. I don't expect them to know all my rules. I should tell them what rules I have, and they should be aware of them, and then they make decisions, and they win or lose based on those decisions, right? That's kind of how I want to win. I think those are the most rewarding games for me, not when I finish a game and someone said, I just didn't know you could do that, right? Now, there is some exceptions to this. Inquisition's a great example, because Inquisition has a ploy which is essentially absolute authority. It's a nope ploy, right? And what you can't do is be constantly telling your opponent, like, if you're going to be able to use that or not, right? Like, if I activate this guy, will you nope him? Like, or will you stop me from using that ability? Isn't necessarily a fair way of doing it, because if they do it and you then use that ability, they now know that you would use that ability. So for them taking it back, it means that they've played a risk that you wouldn't use it, but you have. And that's given away the game plan. So there's, like, in that instance, it's the same as Vox Scream for for Nemesis Claw. Like, you have to make that decision that you're doing that thing, and at that point you can then nope it or not. So I think those are one of those abilities where Vox Scream and Absolute Authority and Denounce are, like, really key abilities that you explain at the start of the game, and you go, I have this thing, it will catch you out if you're not aware of it. And my recommendation is that, like, you keep it in the back of your mind, or you take the deck of cards with you and you go, I'm going to keep this out in front of you so you can see that I've got these abilities, and I might use them, but I'm only going to tell you I'm using it once I've used it, right? So, like, you're open and honest at the start of the game, but during the game, I'm not going to say to someone, let's say I'm playing against Phobos, and they go, I'm going to use my strategy phase, I'm going to use deadly shots, and I say, oh, just so you know, I can nope it. And they go, oh, okay, well, I won't use it. I'll instead use this other thing and then use my comms to switch over, right? Because now they've understood that, like, you would do an outcome, and they're changing their decision based on it. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. But anyway, my point being is, you need to ask questions. if you don't want to ask questions, I highly recommend that you have the Games Workshop app. The rules are free now, right? Like, and that's really useful. They have an app on Android and they have an app on iPhone. If not, you can go online and you can download the hard copy rules of the PDFs and print them off, whatever your preferred method is. I prefer the app because it's really useful to be able to quickly flick through and have something that's like in your hand during a tournament. And what you can do during like the tournament is you can just like check rules, right? Like without asking them specifically, like can your sniper ignore obscurity, or does it have seek light when you're considering putting someone into seek light, or considering doing an action which maybe that they think about. So like using that app is a way of getting the answer to the question without asking the question, and it means you don't telegraph your move, right? So like if you're telling someone in 2 moves time, I'm going to do this thing, like. Do you have a way to remove an APL buff? And they're like, no, cool. All right, well, I'm going to APL buff this guy over here. And then they go, oh, right, like I now know that you're going to go steal his objective, or you're going to go reach this person, or I know that you're going to do this thing, so therefore they're going to now react to it, or whatever, right? I'm trying to think of an example off my head. So like it's a way to just have that constant like revision of their rules and information without slowing the game down, right? Like that's the next part of it as well, is your opponent can continue to measure out their stuff, think about their move, roll their dice, whatever they need to do, whilst you're then just reading and understanding and planning your next move. So it gives you that concurrent activity, which can be useful as well, without interrupting the sort of the flow of the game. Additionally, like this doesn't happen very often, but like it does happen, and it's almost always non-intentional, right? It's like people make rules mistakes, or they misinterpret rules, or the rules have changed in a balanced data slate, or whatever. Like it happens, like all these different things. So if someone says a rule and it like that just sounds way too strong like to be true, you can just read it, like, and this is like not confrontational or anything like that. You can just be reading it on the app and just double check, and you go, oh, okay, sweet. I'm just gonna quickly check something. Just get out your phone, check the rule, read it. Is it the way that you thought it, like that they explained it to work, or is it different? And if it's different, you go, oh, like I've just checked it here and it says this. Is this the same? And they can then understand, read it themselves. Maybe you have a disagreement on the interpretation of the rule. Perfect. Call over a TA. That's what they're there to do, right? They'll help resolve that and say, actually, the way we're ruling at this event is X or Y, and you can proceed, right? So it's a really good way of just being able to non-confrontationally like figure out an answer to yourself, because I think a lot of people just don't want to have like you don't want to say the words that doesn't sound right, like because it might come across aggressive if you're that kind of person. I think most competitive players get to the point where they sort of get over that and they know the rules well enough, they don't necessarily have to do it, and they can challenge, right? And you should challenge players, because no one's, well, I'm sure there is someone out there that's trying to cheat, but hopefully no one that you're going to play is trying to cheat you, right? They're just trying to like measure stuff out, and the game is inaccurate, right? Like if you're measuring top down from a distance, you know, like you like people mismeasure by half an inch here and there, whatever it is. Hence why agreeing positioning is so important. Maybe you knocked the board and now a model is slightly closer or slightly further away, whatever it's going to be, right? Like just challenge it to say, hey, is that correct? Is that how that rule plays? There's so many times that I've had rules played wrong, like by me or against me or whatever. Everyone does that. Like no one's a brain box that knows every single rule in the entire game. And like that shouldn't be the expected outcome. Now potentially, like as you get to more higher end competitions, different competitions might want to play it differently. You know, maybe they value the rules knowledge alone as being like a key part of the game, and therefore you should sort of know it. But having the app there, like it's free, you can have it available. You can double check throughout the game. It doesn't give away your plan. It doesn't telegraph your intentions or your movement, and it lets you progress. But if in doubt, like it's a social game, just ask the questions, right? Like most of the time, your opponent's probably going to give you the answer. You can say like, hey, you got that guy and that guy. Like which of those two guys is better in melee? And like if your opponent's a good opponent, they're going to say the guy with the 2 swords and relentless power weapons is really good in melee. You probably want to shoot him, and the guy that's just got fists, you can probably stuff him in with a hatchet. So like that's kind of the way the game should be approached. So ask questions and challenge people is useful. And if you don't want to do that, then use the app. Use your TOs, right? Like they're there to help you. Like they're there to help the game run smoothly, be like unbiased. Like that's the point of them being there. So hopefully those are useful tips, and I'll just quickly run through them again so you can see where we're at. So understand scoring is the first one. Understand the tempo of the game and the particular mission that you're playing. Make sure you can sequence correctly. Understand the probability of your actions and outcomes. Make sure you position correctly and understand your positioning. Play to time and make sure that you understand when to use your time appropriately. And finally, ask questions or use the Warhammer app. That is your 7, how to get to 2 hands. Hopefully that was useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe there's something I've missed. Maybe there's some better advice that you have, or maybe you disagree with some of those. Maybe you think actually you don't need to understand scoring, or the positioning is not that important because of X, Y, and Z. Well, please do elaborate. Let's share that knowledge. Let's get better at the game and try and make sure that we each improve and we each continue to try and get better at this what I think is an amazing game. And hopefully you guys do as well. So that ends this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. That brings us to the end of the episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. It really is the best way to help a small channel like ours. And if you can't wait and you do want early access, we have a Patreon where you can get exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Just drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan, this has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.